Have you ever had that strange sensation? That moment when your thoughts don't seem entirely your own? Perhaps it happened when you caught yourself repeating a phrase everyone says, or when you felt ashamed of something that, if alone, would never bother you. It's as if there's a second mind operating within you, a mind that doesn't belong to you. Émile Durkheim, one of the founders of modern sociology, would say you're not crazy. In fact, you're simply perceiving something that usually goes unnoticed. The presence of collective consciousness acting upon your individuality. In his works, The Division of Labor in Society and The Rules of Sociological Method, Durkheim reveals a disturbing truth. Many of your thoughts aren't really yours. They're manifestations of a larger invisible mind that hovers over all of us. Think about this. When you feel compelled to repeatedly check your social media, is it really your desire, or is this other mind controlling you? When you judge someone for not following a certain social norm, is it really your morality, or is this collective entity speaking through you? The collective consciousness is like an ocean, and we are merely drops of water, convinced of our individuality while being carried by currents we can't even see. Our individuality, which we value so much in the modern world, could it be just an illusion? I know it sounds frightening, but stay with me for the next few minutes. I promise that by the end of this video, you'll never see society or yourself in the same way again. If this idea has already started to disturb something inside you, you're on the right track. Keep watching to understand how the collective mind shapes almost everything in your life, from your most intimate desires to your most fundamental values. Leave your like now and stay until the end, not as a favor to me, but as a first act of awareness about the invisible forces that normally direct your attention. So let's unravel together this mystery that Durkheim called collective consciousness, something that is always present, but that we rarely perceive. You've been told a story since you were born, the story of the individual, autonomous, independent, and free. Modern society celebrates your uniqueness, your personal choices, your individual rights. Think for yourself, they say. Be an original, they encourage. Follow your own path, they advise. This narrative runs through everything from our education systems to our advertising, from our political ideologies to our self-help books. We're trained to believe our thoughts emerge from within us, pure expressions of our authentic selves. When you make a decision, you assume it's your decision. When you feel something, you assume it's your feeling. When you believe something, you assume it's your belief. It's a comforting story, the myth of pure individuality. But Émile Durkheim saw through this illusion over 100 years ago. In his studies of human societies, he observed something profound. Our most personal thoughts are often the most collective ones. The very language you use to form your individual thoughts was given to you by society. The moral framework you use to judge right from wrong wasn't invented by you. It was installed in you through years of social conditioning. Even now, as you watch this video, algorithms designed by collective intelligence are determining what you'll see next. Your seemingly spontaneous interests, the products you choose to buy, the career path you decided to follow. How many of these were truly your own choices, and how many were shaped by social expectations so deeply embedded that you mistake them for your own desires? Look at social media, where millions believe they're expressing uniqueness while following identical patterns. Notice how your opinions on complex issues often align perfectly with your social group. Observe how your definition of success mysteriously matches what your culture has defined as valuable. The uncomfortable truth that Durkheim revealed is that what we call thinking for yourself is often just unconsciously reflecting the collective mind. The authentic individual making purely independent choices might be the greatest fiction of modern times. not because individuality doesn't exist, but because it exists within the greater reality of collective consciousness that flows through each of us, shaping our thoughts in ways we rarely recognize. But if this is true, if our thoughts aren't entirely our own, then who or what is doing the thinking? Imagine waking up inside a theater where you've been watching the same play for so long that you've forgotten you're in an audience. The script seems to be your life, the stage directions feel like your choices, and the dialogues sound like your thoughts. This is the invisible prison of collective consciousness that Durkheim discovered, not made of bars and locks, but of shared beliefs, unquestioned assumptions, and social expectations. The walls of this prison are transparent. The rules that govern your behavior aren't written down. They're embedded in uncomfortable glances when you violate a social norm, in the approval you feel when you conform, in the shame that washes over you when you step outside acceptable boundaries. These forces are what Durkheim called social facts, phenomena that exist outside of any individual but exert power over all of us. In his groundbreaking work, Suicide, Durkheim demonstrated something shocking. Even the most personal, intimate decision to end one's life follows predictable social patterns. Suicide rates remain remarkably stable within societies over time, changing only when the social fabric changes. How could something as deeply personal as suicide be predicted? Through social factors, unless our inner lives are profoundly shaped by collective forces. The prison extends into your digital life too. Every time you check how many likes your post received, you're responding to the collective mind's judgment. When you feel anxiety about missing out on what others are experiencing, you're feeling the pull of collective consciousness. The algorithms that predict what you'll watch next work because, despite our cherished sense of uniqueness, our behaviors follow patterns laid down by the collective mind. What makes this prison so effective is that you are your own guard. You've internalized the rules so completely that you police yourself. You feel genuine guilt when violating norms that were installed in you. You feel authentic pride when conforming to expectations you didn't choose. The voice in your head that you call conscience speaks in the dialect of your society. Durkheim wasn't suggesting that we're merely puppets. Rather, he saw that we're like fish swimming in water. The collective consciousness is our environment, so pervasive and constant that we stop noticing it. We mistake its currents for our own movement. Its temperature becomes our temperature. Its limits define our sense of what's possible. But if we're swimming in this invisible ocean of collective thought, is there any way to come up for air? To see the water we've been swimming in all along? Émile Durkheim's genius wasn't just in identifying the collective mind, but in showing us how to see it operating in our everyday lives. His concept of collective consciousness isn't abstract theory. It's a lens that suddenly brings your world into focus, revealing patterns you've always felt but couldn't name. In The Elementary Forms of Religious Life, Durkheim made perhaps his most profound discovery, that society itself is the true object of religious worship. When people gather to practice their faith, they're experiencing the power of collective consciousness in its most concentrated form. That feeling of something greater than yourself isn't just imagination, it's the very real experience of the collective mind becoming visible to you. The sacred, Durkheim revealed, is society experiencing itself. This explains why moments of intense collective experience, whether at concerts, sports events, protests, or religious gatherings, feel so transcendent. In these moments, the usually invisible collective consciousness becomes palpable. You feel connected to something larger than yourself because you actually are. The boundary between you and the collective mind temporarily dissolves, and you glimpse the greater reality that Durkheim uncovered. But this collective consciousness isn't a harmonious whole. In modern societies, it's fractured into what Durkheim called collective representations, shared ideas, beliefs, and values that can conflict with each other. Think about how you might simultaneously believe in both individual freedom and community responsibility, experiencing inattention when these values clash. That's not just your personal confusion, it's the collective mind working through its own contradictions within you. The most liberating aspect of Durkheim's theory is understanding that the thoughts that feel most personal to you, your sense of morality, your deepest values, your understanding of what makes a life worthwhile, are expressions of collective consciousness. This doesn't make them less real or meaningful. On the contrary, it connects your inner life to something profound and enduring. When you feel outraged at injustice, inspired by beauty, or moved by compassion, you're not just having private emotional reactions, you're experiencing the collective mind's values flowing through you. Your moral intuitions are where society speaks most directly through your consciousness. This is why moral emotions feel so powerful. They're not just yours, they carry the weight of collective meaning. This digital era has created new forms of collective consciousness. Social media platforms aren't just connecting individual minds. They're creating emergent collective intelligence with its own patterns, values, and momentum. The viral spread of ideas, the formation of digital tribes, the contagious nature of online emotions, these are modern manifestations of the collective mind that Durkheim foresaw. But if your thoughts are shaped by collective forces, where does that leave you as an individual? Are you simply dissolved into the social whole? Now comes the uncomfortable moment of reckoning. If Durkheim is right, then you must confront a disturbing question. How much of what you consider you is actually the collective mind thinking through you? The values you hold most sacred, the goals you pursue, the definition of success that drives you. How many of these did you consciously choose, and how many were absorbed from your social environment? The crisis comes when you realize that even this very act of questioning is happening within language and concepts given to you by society. This realization can trigger what Durkheim observed as anomie, a state of normlessness and disconnection. If your thoughts aren't fully your own, if your deepest beliefs are socially constructed, then what remains of the authentic self? Where is the boundary between you and the collective consciousness that flows through you? Some respond to this crisis by clinging more tightly to individualism, insisting that they are immune to social influence. Others swing to the opposite extreme, concluding that individuality is completely illusory. Durkheim suggested a more nuanced path, understanding that your individuality exists, but within and in relationship to collective consciousness. The modern digital world intensifies this crisis. Your attention is now the most valuable commodity, harvested by algorithms designed to predict and influence your behavior. These systems don't target your rational mind. They target the unconscious patterns that Durkheim identified, the ways the collective mind operates through you without your awareness. When you feel addicted to checking notifications, when you can't stop scrolling, when you feel pressure to present a certain image online, you're experiencing the collective mind exerting its power through new technological channels. But here's where Durkheim's insight becomes truly revolutionary. Awareness itself is transformative. The moment you recognize how collective consciousness shapes your thoughts, you gain a degree of freedom from its unconscious influence. You can't step outside it completely. We remain social beings, but you can develop a reflective relationship with it. This is the paradox that Durkheim leads us to. True individuality doesn't come from denying collective consciousness, but from understanding your relationship to it. The person who insists they're completely independent of social influence is the most thoroughly governed by it, precisely because they can't see it. Genuine autonomy begins with recognizing the social forces that have shaped you. You are not what you think. You are what the system has trained you to think you are. But awareness of this training is the first step toward a new kind of freedom. Not freedom from society, but freedom through understanding your place within it. We've arrived at the paradox that Durkheim's work ultimately reveals. True individuality can only emerge through understanding how deeply we're shaped by collective consciousness. This isn't a defeat for the individual, it's an invitation to a more authentic way of being. When you recognize the collective mind operating through you, you gain the power to engage with it consciously. You can begin to distinguish between the thoughts that are merely social programming and those that represent your unique position within the social whole. This doesn't mean rejecting society. Durkheim emphasized that meaningful human life is only possible within social bonds. Instead, it means developing a reflective relationship with the collective consciousness. In practical terms, this awareness creates new possibilities. You can observe how social media platforms are designed to trigger collective responses and choose when to engage more mindfully. You can notice when your consumption patterns are driven by social comparison rather than genuine need. You can recognize when your political opinions are simply those of your social group and challenge yourself to consider perspectives beyond your immediate circle. Durkheim's vision wasn't fatalistic, it was emancipatory. By understanding the collective mind, you reclaim the ability to participate in it consciously. In his study of religion, Durkheim observed that societies periodically need moments of collective effervescence, times when people come together to renew their shared consciousness. Perhaps this video, this moment of reflection, can be such a moment for you. The 21st century has created new forms of collective consciousness, operating through digital networks, global media, and artificial intelligence. These systems can either further submerge us in unconscious social patterns or become tools for a more awakened participation in our shared reality. The choice depends partly on how many of us understand what Durkheim saw, that the collective mind is real, powerful, and constantly at work within us. I invite you not just to think about these ideas, but to observe them in action in your daily life. Notice when you feel the pull of social expectations. Pay attention to moments when collective emotions sweep through your online communities. Recognize when your deepest convictions echo the values of groups you belong to. This awareness itself is transformative. If something in this exploration has awakened a new perspective for you, don't let it fade. Share this video with someone who's ready for this understanding. We're at a moment in history where comprehending the collective mind isn't just philosophically interesting, it's essential for navigating our increasingly complex social reality. The journey that Durkheim began over a century ago continues through each person who awakens to the reality of collective consciousness. In that awakening lies the possibility of a new kind of freedom. Not the illusory freedom of the isolated individual, but the deeper freedom that comes from understanding our true place in the social world. That understanding starts now with you in this moment of recognition.